You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers. And
Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
9:30 on Wednesday, the 7th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So there's a huge shortage of dentists. If you struggle to see your dentist, you are not alone. They will be paid golden hellos of £20,000 to move to rural areas where there is a shortage of NHS appointments.
Found the protest, the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman says the government has to go much further to stop the glorification of Islamic terrorism on British streets. I don't think the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, is listening.
And royal reunion. Duke of Sussex visited his dad following the King's cancer diagnosis in a meeting that lasted a maximum of 30 minutes. Is there any chance that Prince Harry and William will now reconcile their royal rift?
And leaked Rwanda files. In a best-case scenario, how many illegal arrivals will be removed? Just 12% to Rwanda. We'll be hearing what the Home Office has to say about that shortly.
And Lineker's BBC guidelines. The Match of the Day presenter Gary Lineker said he helped to draw up the BBC social media guidelines that allow him much more freedom and that the broadcaster loves his social media use.
And the Prime Minister is to appear exclusively on GB News' People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter to you most. This is what he thinks.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
If you missed the QR code, fear not. As we said, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum Live on GB News over the course of that hour. He will take questions directly from you, the great British public. If you want to be there, head to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest today or scan this QR code on the screen now with your mobile phone.
So let us know all your thoughts and all our talking points today. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. First, here's the news. Sophia.
Bev, Andrew, thank you. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. The headlines at 9:30. The Prince of Wales is to hold his first public engagement since his father's diagnosis. He'll host an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle later, after stepping back from public appearances weeks ago while his wife recovered from surgery. Prince William is expected to carry out extra royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. It comes after Prince Harry was reunited with his father, arriving in London less than 24 hours after the King's cancer diagnosis was made public. The Duke of Sussex is said to have spent 45 minutes with His Majesty at Clarence House before the King and Queen were seen heading to Sandringham on the royal helicopter. It's unclear how long Prince Harry plans to stay in Britain. However, royal sources suggest he has no plans to meet with his brother. And dentists will be offered cash bonuses to take on new patients under a plan to boost the number of appointments available across England. It means around 1 million people who haven't had their teeth checked for 2 or more years could benefit. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. It comes as hundreds of people endure long waits in Bristol, with queues seen around the block after a clinic made new appointments available on the NHS. Leading dentists are warning the recovery plan isn't enough. However, Health Minister Victoria Atkins told GB News it will lead to faster care.
We want to go further and faster because I want to open up dental surgeries and appointments to more people around the country. So the plan that we're announcing today ensures that we are getting dental care faster, simpler and fairer towards people that really need it.
Those are the headlines. To sign up for news alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, the Popcons launched yesterday. They're headed up by, you remember her, Liz Truss. She was Prime Minister for all of 49 days. And the former Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, Mark Littlewood.
So this is the popular Conservatism movement, and they describe themselves as a grassroots campaign. As you can see, their former Prime Minister Liz Truss is leading this, along with Jacob Rees-Mogg and Lee Anderson, who also spoke at the event.
In the crowd also was the Australian model and actress who made her name, I think it was on Neighbours.
There you go.
Holly Valance. Remember her from Neighbours? I'm afraid I don't, actually, but it's where she shot to fame in 1999 because she was called Flick Scully.
She was also on Strictly Come Dancing a few years ago. She's the wife of a Tory donor, Nick Candy. Very, very, very wealthy man.
Although he doesn't give money to Tories since Boris Johnson was ousted.
Well, she told our political editor, Christopher Hope, why she was there.
Many things worry and bother me with 2 little children to bring up and what they might inherit. So I want to come and listen to ideas, good ideas.
And have you always been a right-of-centre person, or is that, are you a Conservative? Where are you politically?
I would say that everyone starts off as a lefty and then wakes up at some point after you start either making money, working, trying to run a business, trying to buy a home, and then realise what crap ideas they all are, and then you go to the right.
And you heard, of course, Liz Truss speak just now, Jacob Rees-Mogg. How did you find that? Who was your favourite speaker? Oh,
the speakers today were fantastic. I thought Liz was actually really, really interesting to listen to. Jacob for PM. The MP for Ashfield was awesome. Love a Northerner, straight to the point and very sensible and for real people.
Holly Valance there, who knew? Like, if you picture being back in the 90s with your soap operas, fast forward to 2024, and there is this beautiful and articulate woman talking about politics in that way. I think it's really cool, and well done, Christopher Hope, because she's very private. She doesn't talk to anybody.
No, she's never done an interview.
No, we don't think she does.
So
what she said, though, I think it's so interesting. Like, everyone starts out on the left.
Yeah.
Then they realise they want to buy a house or they want to do something, and then she said, I realise it's all...
Or they have kids.
The RAP.
And they want to send them to a private school, or they want... Yeah.
Good for you, Holly.
I was pretty right-wing when I was a teenager, actually, so I've probably just become more so as I've said. Now, look, you have to have a view on this. Prince Harry, 10.5 hours, that flight from LA, and he was in the palace precincts for 45 minutes. The Times and The Sun both say they spoke for 30 minutes after the King's cancer diagnosis.
That's right. The King and Queen are now in Sandringham, where they're going to stay until he recovers. But does Prince Harry's visit signal the end of this family rift?
No.
You would think not, really, would you, given that he was there for such a short period of time? But
And no meeting with William.
No meeting with William. But you've told us what you think.
He's just flying back to get some more dirt on the royal family, and basically that's his third book coming out.
Harry's been a traitor to his family, and I don't think he should be accepted back.
I don't think it will rekindle anything in the royal family. I don't trust him. I'd rather he didn't come over. I'm glad he's left that horrible wife of his behind. He should not be allowed back into this country. He should be exiled.
I'm pretty pleased that he's coming, but I'm disappointed as well that he's not brought Meghan or the kids. That is really what his dad would really love to see.
Will it heal the rift in the royal family? I very much doubt it, because there's only one person wearing the trousers in that family, and the name is Meghan.
I just hope that William and Harry can put their differences aside and think about their father. Stop all the animosity.
I love our viewers. They are just brilliant, aren't they?
And they tell it as it is. But I'm going to stick up for Meghan in one sense. It's very easy to say. I'll just tell you why, because everyone blames her for the fact Harry's estranged from his family. He's the royal.
So glad you said that, feminist Andrew Pearce.
Yeah.
Who knew you had that inside?
No, he's the royal. He could say to his wife,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're not going to keep attacking my family. I was born a royal. I was born a prince. We've done very well out of it. He's had a good life, a very privileged life. He should have said no to her. He's too weak, and OK, perhaps she has walked over, but he's gone along with it.
Yeah, he hasn't had a gun to his head when he's made all of these decisions, regardless of the conversations they're having at home between the two of them. Yeah. And I think she often gets, responsibility for this, and they just presume that he's a passenger, and he's not.
A marriage takes two.
Exactly.
And I think, but what I think is hugely significant, the King flew by helicopter from the helipad in Buckingham Palace to Sandringham. It's not as if he had to get an EasyJet flight or a British Airways flight. He could have delayed that helicopter any time he liked. He could have taken Harry with him. There's room in the helicopter. He just didn't trust him, in my view.
No, clearly.
Get out of here.
See what Cameron thinks. He's there on the ground in Buckingham Palace. Good morning, Cameron Walker. You hear our speculation here. The King could have, presumably, said, let's put the kettle on, have a packet of biscuits and have a proper catch-up, but he didn't. He got straight back in his helicopter and slung his hook after half an hour.
Well, the thing is, Bev, he did, according to some of the papers this morning, delay that helicopter flight from Buckingham Palace so he could meet his youngest son. He was expected to leave London a lot earlier than planned, but the fact that Prince Harry had made the journey across the Atlantic to see him meant that the King decided to delay the helicopter, according to a source speaking to the Sun newspaper this morning. So as we know, Prince Harry landed at around lunchtime after the 10.5-hour flight. He was whisked off to the private VIP Windsor suite, got into a black SUV escorted by 2 police cars. He was inside Clarence House for 45 minutes. That's what we know. And then the papers are reporting this morning, the Times and the Sun specifically, that the meeting lasted for around half an hour. Now, as we've all been saying this morning, why is it that he's flown across the Atlantic for only a half-an-hour meeting with the King? A source close to William's told me there are absolutely no plans for William and Harry to meet, which shows that their relationship is clearly still very, very rocky indeed. And yet the King and Harry did make time to see each other for half an hour, but it seems like a very short amount of time before the King and Queen escaped, literally, kind of from the Buckingham Palace garden in a helicopter to Sandringham. Now, on the other hand, the royal family is different to us, isn't it? And the King clearly, despite the fact he's had a cancer diagnosis, has an incredibly busy schedule, and it could well be perfectly normal for him and his son to only have a half-an-hour meeting. I think to most of us, if you're flying halfway across the world, you're going to spend longer than half an hour with a family member. But for the royal family, that could just be normal. But it's the optics which are the problem here. The fact that it was such a short meeting, and then Harry left very swiftly, and then the King and Queen left very swiftly after that, I think perhaps speaks volumes here. And according to the papers, although we haven't had it confirmed by Buckingham Palace, there are no plans for Harry or his father to meet again. And that was the first time they'd actually spoken to each other in 16 months.
Pretty damning, isn't it, Cameron, in terms of the future of their relationship? Thank you very much. We'll be coming to you later in the show as well this morning there in Buckingham Palace.
People think they talked at the coronation. They didn't. The last time they spoke was at the Queen's funeral. He had he sat behind Princess Anne's plumed hat, if you remember, at the coronation. He didn't stick around for lunch. They didn't talk at all. So the last time he spoke to him, as Cameron says, 60 months ago, the Queen's coronation.
It does tell you...
Sorry, the Queen's funeral.
It feels like Charles has got the shutters down. Yeah. King has said, well, you've had one too many chances.
If you keep monetarising your disputes with your parents, with your family, your brother and your sister-in-law and your father, what do you expect? He can't be trusted.
Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. After this very quick break, GB News has seen some leaked Home Office files relating to Rwanda, and you will not believe the amount of illegal arrivals who would be removed each year even if Rwanda gets off the ground. Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, has plenty to say about it. You do not want to miss this. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, you know, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you were right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
and
are
remember,
being
a lot of people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid.
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, you know, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm, I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something. Right. And you say, what? Yeah. And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that are being passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I'm all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tata Steel thing. Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, you know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say
can't
you
get any more
support
obvious.
some of these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message.
Any of them.
But I do appreciate the message. But sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Very good morning, it's 9:46. Thank you for joining us on Britain's Newsroom. So, GB News has exclusively seen files looking at the Rwanda policy, and they show that a whopping 12% of illegal arrivals will be removed each year in the best-case scenario.
That's ridiculous. This means the maximum number of deportations in the first year would be a mere 500. The Home Office says, get this, the Rwanda scheme is uncapped. The number of people who will be removed to Rwanda will depend on a range of factors. We don't comment on unverified leaked documents. In other words, they haven't denied it.
Well, in the studio is the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. These are leaked documents, Richard. This is Nigel Farage's project, I understand. What do you make of those figures when you hear that?
horrifying and not surprising. I mean, because nobody's got any confidence whatsoever in the Home Office, utterly incompetent. We've got the other case of this Clapham attacker and the incompetence and the negligence around that. But that Home Office statement saying that it's uncapped, we basically know that's not true. That's the reality. And I think that the truth is that the Prime Minister and the former Home Secretary and the current Home Secretary, at best they've deliberately misled the British people. At worst, they have knowingly lied to the British people. This is incredibly serious as to what's going on here. They spent hundreds of millions of pounds and a year of parliamentary time on something that, at best in the first year, it's a few hundred people, which we've all been saying, it's not a deterrent at all.
So if it's about, I think they spent 280 million so far in Rwanda.
So far.
If that's only 500 migrants kicked over there
for the first year.
How does that work out per migrant?
It's very simple. Millions. Whether it's 30,000 or 40,000, it's a massive number coming across the channel every year. The idea that if 500 get sent to Rwanda, that's a deterrent, is for the birds. Anybody with an iota of common sense will know that that's ridiculous. That's not a deterrent, it's a joke, it's a farce. And they've been wasting our hundreds of millions of our cash on this ridiculous scheme. And quite rightly, people up and down the country are aghast, are furious. I'm hearing it every day of the week from people, the anger about this. And this will just grow.
And I see the Prime Minister's now rowing back a little on the bet he had with another broadcaster, whose name we don't mention here, that there will be a Rwanda flight in the air before the general election.
He got trapped because he had to show confidence in the scheme. But look, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's not a deterrent. And the whole line of the government has been that this is a deterrent. It's not. It's a joke. It's a farce. But they can't be honest with us now because they've literally... I mean, they've put everything. The whole government's modus operandi is on this working. It's very simple how you stop the boats. You pick up and you safely take back to France, which you're legally entitled to do. I'm the only politician who is saying, this is what needs to be done, it will work, we know it works because it worked in Australia, and the fact that none of them have said I'm wrong on my interpretation of the international treaties means that they know I'm right, but they daren't admit it because it would be too embarrassing, too humiliating. It's utterly disgraceful, this lack of leadership.
If they did it, it would be a game changer.
Of course it would.
But they would upset their globalist friends, right? It would upset the position of this government on the global stage. That's why they won't do it.
Which is what happened with Tony Abbott when they did it in Australia 11 years ago. And it upset a few of the lefties and the UN and the international bodies. But guess what? 11 years later, the boats are still not coming to Australia. And both parties of either political persuasion have continued that policy. This stuff isn't rocket science. And why it's so important is that people are dying in the English Channel. We've already sadly lost at least 5 this year. Thousands are dying in the Mediterranean every year. With this level of leadership, those deaths, almost all of them would stop. I think that's the kind and compassionate thing to do.
I agree. And people are dying here from some people who arrive here with unknown and untold traumatic damage to themselves, carrying out attacks like the Clapham chemical attack that we've seen this week.
Who's still on the run.
And this guy's still on the run. And that is one of at least 3 asylum seekers who committed acts of violence against other people in this country.
Oh, no, I'm actually trying to get to the bottom of the numbers because I think the numbers are deliberately being covered up by the authorities because they are too... I mean, I think there's a serious issue here and I think they're being covered up. I think the authorities owe us the truth because we know that there are these acts of violence, of rape, of knifings, and indeed of murder. There's an article in today's Telegraph by Alison Pearson relating to it, listing out just some of the examples. And this is aided and abetted by various churches up and down the country. And the abuse that human rights lawyers and priests and others, they know this is going on. They know they're deliberately circumventing the rules by this conversion to Christianity.
It's so disgusting, the way they're gaming the system and the way these Church of England vicars are going along with it. And then we see the Church of England bishops in the House of Lords, Richard, deliberately trying to scupper... I know you don't think the Rwanda scheme works, but trying to stop the Rwanda thing because they want illegal migrants to continue to cross the channel. What is the Church thinking of?
I've no idea,
but it's their moral compass.
Well, it's not surprising their audiences are plummeting. Maybe they should focus actually on their customer base because their customer base does not want this.
They would, of course, say they might be doing the compassionate thing from the goodness of their own heart.
The kind and compassionate thing is not to let these people make the journey, which will increase the risk of them dying.
I really want to know what you thought of the... was it popcorn or was it popcorn?
They called it popcorn. I called it popcorn. One bang and you're gone. It's a quickie. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You're never going to hear of them again.
So this is Liz Truss's faction of the Conservative Party.
The sixth family.
The sixth family?
Well, we've got 5 families. We're talking about 5 families, as in the mapping. Now it's the 6th one, isn't it? Another group.
So obviously Nigel Farage was there. He was partly there because he was there with GB News, and he said he wanted to go and listen to the ideas which are being propounded in a room like that of right-leaning Conservatives. Why weren't you there?
I wasn't invited, NFI.
Would you have gone? Would you have gone?
No, certainly not, because I would have known that there weren't going to be any good ideas there that we didn't already have ourselves, and that's the reality. I think when Nigel went, I think he looked at the list of things and said, well, that looks like the Reform Manifesto.
Right.
And so, actually, there were no new ideas. These are ideas that are out there already by a party with some common-sense policies.
But he's still teasing, isn't he, about after the election, yes, I might join the Conservative Party.
No, he's not. He said very clearly he wouldn't. No, what he's doing is... Look, the reality is that is a party that is so bereft of ideas that it's split into all these different families, all these different factions. Who knows what will happen, but it just feels to me, it's literally sort of pop and it's gone.
Yeah.
I was asking, is it Haywood? What was his name? Nick Haywood, the guy that was there talking on the telly to us yesterday? I can't remember. The bloke who was with Liz Truss at the event, who we interviewed yesterday. Look, we both got our we both got our memory.
Somebody's going to tell us an hour.
Mark Littlewood, that's it, not Haywood.
Former head of the IEA.
Thank you, Mark Littlewood. And he was saying the difference between the PopCon group and the New Conservatives, i.e. Danny Kruger, Miriam Cates and co., is that the PopCon group are concerned about constitutional, systemic change within government. They might have a point about that.
Look, they do have a point about that. There are major parts of the government that needs fundamental reform at every single level.
The Home Office.
And including the Home Office, which frankly just needs demolishing and rebuilding from scratch. It's knackered. But the truth is that people's real concerns is short-term. It's the immigration, it's the cost of living, it's the health.
We've got to move on. Should we rebuild Manchester United Stadium, Old Trafford, with public money?
No.
That in just a minute.
No.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for many of us, but plenty of bright weather for the rest of today, although cloud and rain will linger across the far south. That will come and go, especially across parts of Devon and Cornwall through the day. It's going to be on and off rainfall. The cloud also extends up to around the M4, but north of that, actually plenty of bright spells, some patchy cloud around, and continued sleet and snow showers for the north and west of Scotland. One of the two of these getting into parts of Northern Ireland as well, but actually away from these showers, feeling perfectly pleasant with temperatures of 7 to 8 Celsius across central parts and light winds, although it will stay windy in the far north and northwest. That wind will continue to drive snow showers into northwest Scotland overnight. Meanwhile, the next bout of wet weather returns to the south and southwest. This will be falling as heavy and persistent rain for parts of South Wales and southwest England by dawn. Mild here, but cold further north, with temperatures well below freezing for parts of Scotland and northern England. And as the rain in the south moves north and bumps into the cold air, well, it's going to turn increasingly to snow, mainly across mid-Wales, the Midlands northwards. Increasingly, that's going to affect northern England and Northern Ireland later in the day as well. But it's certainly going to be a wintry day with that snow building up, and some significant snowfall over northern hills could cause disruption.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Up next, the modern tooth fairy. The government's going to offer dentists cash intensive to take on extra NHS patients, particularly in rural areas, because the system is broken. When did you last see an NHS dentist? Britain's Newsroom on GB News, People's Channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Beth Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Dentist shortage. When did you last see an NHS dentist? So the government is now offering a whopping £20,000 for dentists to take on extra patients. But isn't this just a sticking plaster solution?
Ban the protest. The former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says that the government has to go much further to stop the glorification of Islamist terror on British streets. And I wonder if Home Secretary James Cleverly is listening.
And not much of a royal reunion, was it? The Duke of Sussex visited the King after his cancer diagnosis. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. No meeting with Prince William, so it seems there's no prospect of that rift being resolved. GB News presenter Pip Thompson has the latest.
I'm not sure Prince William will be available at least today to see his younger brother, even if he wanted to, because he's back performing royal duties here at Windsor Castle today and in central London tonight. But just how long will the Duke of Sussex be on UK soil for?
And is it the end of Old Trafford? Is the iconic home stadium of Manchester United set to be knocked down? The billionaire Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who owns a 25% share of the club, might seek public funding to help make it a reality.
Outrageous. And the Prime Minister will appear exclusively on GB News People Forum. It's an hour-long Q&A in the North East on the issues that matter most to you. This is what he has to say about it.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
So that's this upcoming Monday in the northeast of England. We now know if you can be there, then do get in touch with us at the channel. We would love to hear your questions put to the Prime Minister. You can scan this QR code via your mobile phone that's on your telly as we speak, or you can go onto the gbnews.com website for the /PM section and register your interest there. We would love to see you there. Register your interest today or scan the QR code on your screen now.
And don't forget to let us know your thoughts on all our talking points today, whether it's Prince Harry or NHS dentistry. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, here's the news with Sophia Winter.
Bev, Andrew, thank you. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Prince of Wales is due to hold his first public engagement since his father's diagnosis. He'll host an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle later after stepping back from duties 3 weeks ago while the Princess of Wales recovered from surgery. Prince William is expected to carry out extra royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. It comes after Prince Harry was reunited with his father, arriving in London less than 24 hours after the King's cancer diagnosis was made public. The Duke of Sussex is said to have spent 45 minutes with His Majesty at Clarence House before the King and Queen were seen heading to Sandringham on the royal helicopter. It's unclear how long Prince Harry plans to stay in Britain, and GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker says there are no plans for him to meet his brother.
A lot of people are asking this morning, well, why is it that Prince Harry flew all that way from Los Angeles to London just for a half-an-hour meeting? A source told me, who's close to the Prince of Wales yesterday, that they have absolutely no plans to meet either, which suggests to me their relationship still is very much at rock bottom between Prince Harry and Prince William. There clearly is a bit of an olive branch between the King and his youngest son, Prince Harry, because they have actually met, and Prince Harry has made the effort to fly from Los Angeles to the United Kingdom.
Dentists will be offered a cash incentive to take on new patients, and some will get £20,000 bonuses under a plan to boost the number of appointments available across England. It means around 1 million people who haven't had their teeth checked for 2 or more years could benefit. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. It comes as hundreds of people endure long waits in Bristol, with queues seen around the block after a clinic made new appointments available on the NHS. Leading dentists are warning the recovery plan isn't enough. However, Health Secretary Victoria Atkins told GB News it'll lead to faster care.
We want to go further and faster because I want to open up dental surgeries and appointments to more people around the country. So the plan that we're announcing today ensures that we are getting dental care faster, simpler and fairer towards people that really need it.
MPs have criticised the government's decision to build HS2 between London and Birmingham without extending the line to Manchester. The Public Accounts Committee says the revised plan offers very poor value for money, and they're highly sceptical of the Department for Transport's ability to secure private investment. It's after warnings that Phase 1 alone could cost £66.5 billion, far exceeding the original budget of £44.5 billion. And a door that broke off a Boeing aircraft mid-flight last month appears to have been missing 4 major bolts, according to an initial report. Passengers endured a terrifying emergency landing when the door was ripped away, leaving a large hole in the plane as the air rapidly depressurised. Personal items, including iPhones, were later found on the streets below, while the door was discovered in a residential back garden. The US Safety Board says crucial bolts were missing from the Boeing 737 MAX 9 after they were removed to fix rivets that had been damaged during production. And heavy snow could cause disruption later this week, with as much as 20 centimetres possible in higher areas. The Met Office has expanded its yellow warning, with temperatures set to drop across Northern Ireland, North Wales and Northern England later this week. We're being warned of possible power cuts, travel delays and isolated communities being cut off. Meteorologists say the cold spell could linger into late February. In other news, Russia launched a massive barrage of strikes on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities during this morning's rush hour. 2 people were killed when Russian forces fired 64 missiles and drones towards the capital, more than half of which were intercepted by Ukraine's air defences. However, officials say falling debris has cut off electricity to parts of Kyiv, leaving thousands without power. And the right-wing television host Tucker Carlson is in Moscow and says he plans to record an interview with Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News host announced the interview late yesterday in a short video posted to his website and on social media. He said he plans to expose what he calls lies told by other media about Russia, though he provided no evidence and falsely claimed that other journalists hadn't bothered to try to interview Mr. Putin. It comes as Russia's detention of the American journalist Evan Gershkovich reaches 315 days. That's the latest. For news alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. Let's see what you've been saying at home. This is about NHS dentists. I've got 3 kids and I couldn't get an NHS dentist. If I wanted one, could you?
When I lived in East End for many years, when I moved to North London, that was it. Dentist had gone. These days, if you're online, you don't have to tell the dentist you've moved. You can probably carry on.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, I have a fantastic private dentist.
So do I.
It is an expense that shouldn't be a luxury, but it feels like a luxury. Barry said our local NHS dentist has 1,000 people on the waiting list. Now they just charge lots of money for the same NHS treatment, not really private. It's just disguised private treatment.
But actually, NHS dentistry has been paid for since 1951. I'm just looking a checkup, £25.80. That's just for a checkup.
That you would pay as an
NHS dentist. If you want to have a filling, £70.70.
Yeah.
How is that free at the point of delivery?
It's just not. There's no such thing, really,
of the
is
NHS.
there? Tony said it's a disgrace how this government has let down people from getting dental treatment. I've now got into debt after having to go private, and it cost me £89, and all was done was look in my mouth, and I had to pay another £111 for a small filling. It is a disgrace, the prices. You're so right, Tony. I completely sympathise. It is. It's really difficult.
It's been going on for 20 years, this.
It's awful. And about King Charles and the flying visit that was made by Harry before King Charles got in his helicopter and basically jetted off. Kazia has said absolutely pointless flying all that way for just 30 minutes. He should have made it a family affair and brought the kids and at least make an effort with William and Kate and co. Of course, the thing is, if King Charles is about to undergo treatment, there is an infection risk. He probably shouldn't be hanging around with snotty little toddlers, but I can sort of see the logic in that. But and Lynn says, it makes me so angry that we in Great Britain will not learn of the King's diagnosis before Meghan Markle does. Oh, good point, Lynn.
And what about the Nottingham killer? He is in a hospital because he was found guilty of manslaughter.
Kalakane.
He should have been murder, in my view, because he could have then got a whole life sentence. Because he's in a hospital, he's entitled to £380 benefits every month. What a scandal. And Chris says it's a disgrace.
Yeah,
Says it all.
and Cheryl says, how can this be right? My mother was in hospital. We had to tell the DWP. They cut her state pension. When she was in hospital, also, I was my mother's carer for 25 years. I didn't take carer's allowance, otherwise they would have cut her pension credit because you can't have both. And just remind you, I think the depressing part of this conversation is quite how much tax we are paying.
Well, it was the highest tax burden since 1945.
If we weren't paying loads of tax, you might go, fair enough, these services aren't really working anymore, but we're paying more tax than we have done in decades, as you say.
Yep.
Right.
Now, this story infuriates me. I don't do football, as you probably know, but the billionaire Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who owns 25% of Manchester United, he wants to knock down the iconic Old Trafford Stadium, build a new one. Here's the catch. He wants us taxpayers to get involved in funding it. Seem fair to you?
First, though, Prince Harry came back to Britain to see his father following King Charles's cancer diagnosis. The Duke and his father had a 30-minute meeting before the King and Queen went to Sandringham, where he'll stay until he recovers.
Does this mean the end of the royal rift in the family? You've given us your views.
Well, Prince William is back to work. Oh.
Here they are.
He's just flying back to get some more dirt on the royal family, and basically that's his third book coming out.
Harry's been a traitor to his family, and I don't think he should be accepted back.
I don't think it will rekindle anything in the royal family. I don't trust him. I'd rather he didn't come over. I'm glad he's left that horrible wife of his behind. He should not be allowed back into this country. He should be exiled.
I'm pretty pleased that he's coming, but I'm disappointed as well that he's not brought Meghan or the kids. That is really what his dad would really love to see.
Will it heal the rift in the royal family? I very much doubt it, because there's only one person wearing the trousers in that family, and the name is Meghan.
I just hope that William and Harry can put their differences aside and think about their father. Stop all the animosity.
Well, Prince William is back at work today. GBNews presenter Pip Thompson is in Windsor. Is William working at Windsor this morning? Pip, good morning.
Good morning to you. I'm glad we had viewers' thoughts there, because if you'd have come to me any earlier, there was a big white van straight behind me and you'd have seen absolutely diddly squat. But I am outside Windsor Castle, because that is where Prince William is this morning for an investiture ceremony. It is one of his royal duties. He does these investiture ceremonies alongside his father, King Charles, and Princess Anne. But it is the first time he has been back on duty since his father's cancer diagnosis, and indeed since Catherine's, the Princess of Wales, operation last month. He has, of course, been helping to look after their 3 children at their home at Adelaide Cottage here on the Windsor estate. Now, one of those receiving honours today is former England striker Ellen White. She is getting an MBE. So that ceremony expected to last an hour or so. And then later today, Prince William will be heading into central London for a glittering gala dinner in aid of the London Air Ambulance. And we talk about, yes, Prince Harry has been in town. It is suggested that he stayed overnight at a hotel, because we know he was evicted from Frogmore Cottage, don't we? And there are no plans, we understand, for him to meet up with his older brother. But even if he wanted to, it doesn't seem today like Prince William would have any time anyway. And the big question, of course, is how long will Prince Harry actually be on UK soil? Or will he be back on that plane today, 5,000-mile trip back to California? Meanwhile, Prince Charles, he is convalescing and taking it easy, some 3 hours away at Sandringham.
All right.
OK, thank you, Pip. Pip Thompson there at Windsor Castle. Joining us now is royal biographer Angela Levin. Not normally Prince Harry's biggest fan. Good morning, Angela.
Good morning.
Maybe you've revised your opinion of Harry now that he made this journey to come and see his father after this diagnosis.
Well, I did like him hugely. I wrote his biography, spent 15 months with him and thought he was terrific. So I feel that now he's so changed and different that actually I can say exactly what I think because I have known him. What's very interesting and shows a lot about him is the way he's arrived here. If you know you have a father who you haven't seen for a long time, who you know has just heard that he's got cancer and that he's obviously, you know, even if he feels positive about him, as the King has said, it's a huge shock. I think you should ring up. You should say, I would love to come, please tell my father, because he won't get through straight away, that I would love to come and see him, but I don't want to come at a bad time. I don't want to upset him or in any way. Can you tell me what would suit him? This trip seems to be 100% Harry. He flies off in a rush. He gets here when the helicopter's all ready to take King and Queen away, and he wants to talk. It's all about him. He's done this loads of times before, but you would imagine when there's a huge illness standing in the way that he would actually think about what his father needed. Beforehand, he would turn up and get very, very angry if the King couldn't see him. Now, you know, the King works incredibly hard. He has engagements from morning till night. And Harry felt he should drop everything and speak to him. And this is a continuation of this. So I think that Harry has not changed. He hasn't suddenly got a loving feeling and wants to be there and show what he feels really and truly in his heart about his father. He's the same Harry, and I suspect it may be even an idea of Meghan's to send him over to build up their lack of popularity in America.
Could he? Sorry, but could he be with him now?
No.
Do we know where Harry is right now?
He's definitely not with him.
No, he's not with them.
No, he's
no,
definitely.
Sorry, the King and Queen went off. in a helicopter.
Yeah,
and they decided before that they're not going to change what they're doing with Harry. They can't just drop everything when he comes, when he's been so rude, and he gives them very little notice. You can't do that. So he's definitely in London, but maybe he's on his way to the airport. That I don't know.
Angela, I think part of the issue will be as well for the King and Queen Camilla. They cannot trust him, because conversations they've had before that have been private have gone into his book, they've gone into his podcast, they've gone on to his interviews with Oprah Winfrey. He's monetarised private conversations, and we don't know what cancer the King has got. If he told Harry, the next thing it could be on an American talk show. How can they ever trust him again?
Well, they can't. I mean, that's Harry's fault, isn't it? He's absolutely lost it. And once you can't trust somebody, it's very, very difficult to trust them again, because you feel he's either going to try and make money out of it, or he's going to find a small error that he then can make a huge complaint about, and it's all being negative. He does look very negative, nor will he compromise. He used to be somebody who would and negotiate when other people in the royal family had rows. He was known for putting things right, but now he's known for putting things wrong, isn't he? And he just will do as much as he can to make sure he's right and his father is not.
Angela, I think it's quite significant too, isn't it, that the King chose to go to Sandringham yesterday, February the 6th. That, of course, was the day that George VI, the Queen's father, died at Sandringham on February the 6th. That's when her reign started. So that would have been quite a significant moment for the King, returning to Sandringham on that day, that very special anniversary.
Yes, the special anniversary is when his father died, when he died of cancer. So it's an awful lot to think about, and it's a very sad, heavy thing to work through. And I think when he goes to a place that he loves, where there's peace, where people won't see him driving anywhere or putting any pressure under him, that he could actually relax, walk about. What he and Camilla like to do best is to sit in a room with the fire and read a book. They don't need to talk to each other. They just like the peace of sitting there.
Oh, she's gone.
I
think we should just have a minute. It sounds absolutely idyllic, that. Should we just have a minute and sit here in silence and read a book?
The viewers would probably like that, probably. In your case, anyway.
What a lovely life. Imagine you have the time to just sit by the fire and read a book. That's what I long for.
To be fair to the King, he does work long hours. And after dinners, when he goes to these rather boring, I think, I've been to some of them.
Yeah.
He then goes back to his study, carries on working.
Don't blame him.
He's writing letters, he's making phone calls.
Sudoku.
He does call people sometimes at 1 in the morning.
Does he?
He does. Not me. I'd take his call.
Nice little insight. Right, still to come. Man United might be one of the richest clubs in the world, but there is talk that they might want you to pay for their new stadium. That's right. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
And some breaking news. The disgraced paedophile pop star Gary Glitter has lost a parole board application to be freed from jail. The 79-year-old was accused of showing a total lack of remorse towards his victims by lawyers representing the woman he abused when she was 12 years old, and who is now suing him.
Still to come this morning, the BBC has been criticised as spineless and lily-livered in the past. It's no wonder when you hear who has been pulling the strings behind the scenes, helping to write their social media guidelines. It makes a whole lot of things make sense. We're going to do that in just a moment.
But first, a story, it really does make my blood boil. The billionaire Sir Jim Ratcliffe, now he owns 25% of Manchester United, probably the most famous club in the world, wants to knock down the stadium Old Trafford, rebuild it. Here's the catch. He wants taxpayers to get involved in funding it. But
does it even need redevelopment? Joining us now is the author of the world's biggest cash machine, Manchester United, the Glazers and the struggle for football's soul, Chris Blackhurst, and friend of our show. Good morning, Chris. Good to see you. First of all, does Old Trafford need knocking down and building again?
Absolutely not at all. There's one area of the ground where the roof leaks. There's this canopy that comes over the side of the pitch. It doesn't even go on the fans. The fans don't get wet. The whole thing is ridiculous, and basically they're very jealous of the fact that Manchester City, Barcelona, Real Madrid, they've all got these fantastic stadiums, and you know, the whole thing is vanity, and why the taxpayer should pay for it, heaven alone knows. Not at all.
And Ratcliffe is a very rich man, isn't he, Chris? He's a billionaire. Isn't he probably Britain's richest man? And as I recall, he's a tax exile living somewhere like Monaco, so he's got plenty of money. He can rebuild it himself.
You're absolutely spot on. You're spot on. He lives in Monaco. He's a tax exile. So he's asking people who pay their taxes to pay for his stadium. I mean, truly, it's quite shocking. And why on earth? OK, look, Manchester United is a very big football club. It's the world's biggest in terms of fans. But honestly, there are other football clubs in the north. Does the north need a Wembley-type stadium? Arguably not. The whole thing is crazy. What it shows, actually, is that Jim Ratcliffe might be the richest man. He hasn't got much spare cash. And building a stadium these days costs a fortune. The other worry for the fans is that Old Trafford is where their history is. There's the Alex Ferguson stand, there's the Bobby Charlton stand, where all the famous matches were. And here comes a guy who says, along comes a guy who says, I love this club. I love it so much, I'm going to knock the stadium down and build a new one. I mean, and by the way, the taxpayer's paying for it because I'm not going to. I mean, honestly, it makes your blood boil, Andrew. Mine's foaming over.
Chris, I'm born and bred in a family of Man United fans. You know, my dad will be watching.
For you.
But my dad will be watching this today. And maybe you could argue, well, hang on a minute, as you say, it's the biggest club in the world. I don't know what the capacity is of Old Trafford. I should know that. But maybe if they could double the capacity of Old Trafford, it would be great for the area, great for that area of Salford and that area of North Manchester.
Yeah, the capacity of Old Trafford at the moment is 74,000. Wembley is 90,000. And the argument is that you'll have a Wembley in the north and you'll be able to play England matches in the north. Well, they already happen. Yeah, but they already happen in the north. I mean, they move them around. They sometimes play at Old Trafford. They sometimes play at Manchester City, at the Emirates, at the Etihad, or they go to St James's Park in Newcastle. And regardless of what your family think, and I adore your family, but you know, Manchester is not the centre of the universe. It is not the capital of the. It's the self-proclaimed capital of the north. But it's not. You know, there are other northern cities.
Hang on, Chris Blackhurst.
Newcastle.
As a proud Mancunian girl, as a fan of the biggest football club in the world.
My wife's from Manchester. My wife's from Alderley Edge, and
that's posh Manchester. Listen, but maybe there is an argument that maybe if you could build a stadium that seated 150,000 fans, they could get those in every weekend. Great for the local economy, the hotels, the restaurants. You could then put Beyonce could come and play in there, and
well, that's fine.
Music acts.
Look, I've got no problem with that. If Jim Ratcliffe and the Glazers want to build a stadium for £150,000, who are paying Manchester United for their tickets, and the revenue goes to Jim Ratcliffe and the Glazers, that's fine, that's private enterprise. But why should the taxpayer build a stadium for £150,000 so they can line their pockets? Yeah. It's madness.
Chris, the other point is, which you alluded to, Ratcliffe is supposed to love Manchester United, and the Manchester United fans are probably thrilled he's got a toehold in the club now. But it shows a scant lack of respect for the history of the club if one of the first things he wants to do is flatten the ground, which even I've heard of. Old Trafford is probably the most iconic football stadium in the country, if not Europe.
It shows a misjudgment, in my view. I mean, there's no doubt, look, the fans have been complaining. They've complained to me when I wrote my book about the state of Old Trafford. Listen, I go to Fulham. I'm a Fulham season ticket holder. My stand was built in 1901. It has wooden floors, wooden seats. I can barely bend my knees. The turnstile is almost too narrow for people like me to get in. And that's football. And it's like living in a museum. But United fans are very entitled. I get that, you know, big history. But, you know, if you want that stadium, pay for it yourselves.
Quite right.
What about if there's some sort of revenue share with Manchester City Council? That'd work, wouldn't it? If we get some taxpayers
what about
funding
Manchester
money?
City? What about, look, I'm from Barrow, which is much further north, but, you know, next thing you know is that Stockport County, they're in Manchester. Why don't they have a stadium built? You know, let's have them 150,000. I mean, it's madness.
It really is.
I think it's a great debate, though, Chris Blackhurst. Always nice to see you. I'm so sorry that you're a Fulham fan. I can only give you my sympathies. A lot of Londoners in that stadium.
See, that's the cheap shot.
All right, lovely to talk to you. Now, still to come.
Yeah, let's know what you think at home.
I don't think anybody's going to agree with the taxpayer giving money to a billionaire to rebuild a stadium. Not anybody.
Right, still to come. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson says he will, and he is at the moment, interviewing Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. He's come under fire for doing so. It's great news, though, isn't it? That and much more after your morning's news with Sophia Wensler.
Bev, Andrew, thank you. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. The headlines at 10:30. First, to breaking news, the former pop star Gary Glitter has been denied parole. He was jailed for 16 years in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls between 1975 and 1980. Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, is serving a sentence which is due to expire in February 2031. The Prince of Wales is due to hold his first public engagement since his father's diagnosis. He'll host an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle later, after stepping back from public appearances a few weeks ago, while the Princess of Wales recovered from surgery. Prince William is expected to carry out extra royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. And it comes after Prince Harry was reunited with his father, arriving in London less than 24 hours after the King's cancer diagnosis was made public. The Duke of Sussex is said to have spent 45 minutes with His Majesty at Clarence House before the King and Queen were seen heading to Sandringham on the royal helicopter. It's unclear how long Prince Harry plans to stay in Britain. However, royal sources suggest he has no plans to meet with his brother. Dentists will be offered cash bonuses to take on new patients under a plan to boost the number of appointments available across England. It means around 1 million people who haven't had their teeth checked for 2 or more years could benefit. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. It comes as hundreds of people endure long waits in Bristol, with queues seen around the block after a clinic made new appointments available on the NHS. Leading dentists are warning the recovery plan isn't enough. However, Health Secretary Victoria Atkins told GB News it will lead to faster care.
We want to go further and faster because I want to open up dental surgeries and appointments to more people around the country. So the plan that we're announcing today ensures that we are getting dental care faster, simpler and fairer towards people that really need it.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code, or go to on screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2635 and €1.1733. The price of gold is £1,610 and 9 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,667 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, the Nottingham killer Valdo Calacane entitled to benefits because he's not in prison after being charged with manslaughter rather than murder. Of course, he's in that psychiatric hospital. Extraordinary.
Certainly is.
And also in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we are looking at the success of British manufacturing around the country.
Today we're in the heart of Shropshire at SDE Technology. I'm actually with the CCO of the company, Chris Greeno. Chris, I know you've got a lot of successful UK manufacturing news coming out of this building.
Absolutely, we are continuing to invest. We've got big investment plans this year. We've got a 100-ton, 200-ton progression press and a 1,000-ton progression press coming online this year. We're looking at reshoring, so we're getting more and more inquiries, and it's good news.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I know you do a lot of exporting as well, don't you? Maybe not directly export, but your parts get bolted onto aeroplanes, to military vehicles, to automotive vehicles, and obviously get exported all around the world.
Absolutely, and we also export directly to America and Germany. So we're seeing more and more inquiries coming now for UK manufacturers, and certainly UK manufacturers making for the UK market, but also exporting. So it's great news for the UK economy.
Yeah, when you look at UK manufacturing, it's highly respected around the world, so why shouldn't we export?
Absolutely. UK manufactured product is quality product by quality companies, and we should be exporting around the world. We should be looked to for supplying that quality product.
Okay, and skills gap, I know you've got some quite exciting ways of bridging that skill gap here at SDE.
Absolutely. So we don't just train our own, we've also got a training centre here where we train for other companies. So we're very much looking at bringing on apprenticeships. We're looking at training our own, so upskilling, and then bringing on apprenticeships to fill the gaps lower down. But there's exciting times here. Most of our staff have been with us a long time. I've been here for nearly 29 years, and we're looking to the future for UK manufacturing.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time, and I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it, as you know, Eamon. You can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category, it's just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom. And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you, that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know? There's just no right answer. And as you said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:39, you with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
We are joined in the studio by former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry. Morning, gentlemen. Right.
Does she mean us?
Yeah, well, yes. In the absence of any gentleman, you lot will do. Do we want to talk about Gary Lineker, or let's talk about Gary Lineker as opposed to Harry, because I've talked about Harry till I'm kind of sick of Harry. Right.
What's he
Stephen
done now?
Pound. Gary Lineker has revealed in a talk he was giving yesterday, he says, I know the guidelines really well. This is BBC social media guidelines. I was partly involved in drawing them up in terms of the interviews I did with John Hardy when he did the review. Well, that's good to know.
Well, he's not done a very good job of it, has he, in drawing them up when you consider the number of errors and things and the sort of partisan comments he's made. Gary Lineker was famous, I think, for never ever being sent off during his playing career. But, there's time yet. And I think this is a red card. I mean, you don't mark your own homework and then brag about it.
But he keeps doing it, doesn't he? He's rubbing our noses in the fact that the BBC tried to silence him on social media, backed down because some other sports presenters went on strike. I'd have let them stay on strike. Who runs the BBC? Lineker or the bosses? And here he is again, doing just that, rubbing the nose.
Well, he feels like he can float above any criticism about that. He's untouchable.
I have it on fairly good authority, Mike,
do tell.
that he's trying to get the sack. That he wants out of BBC now, and he's pushing it until
get a few bob or elsewhere.
So he'll get more money than if he walks away.
That may be the case, but he covered that yesterday in a line that hasn't really been publicised. Lineker also claimed he'd been offered jobs for substantially more than his £1.3 million match of the day salary. sorry, but has declined them. And then, ludicrously, also added, by the way, I don't listen to Twitter anymore. He said, it's always been a bit of a cesspit, but it's become increasingly toxic, right? I tweet my stuff, but I don't look at Twitter anymore.
Yeah. But he's on it all the time.
Of course he is. I mean, does he think we're all fools? Do we think that he's walking around and saying, I don't take any interest in it? He uses that as a manipulative weapon to get his views over. I don't know where his views have come from over the years. I knew Gary Lineker when he was Everton centre-forward, right? Scored 40 goals in one season. I knew him when he played in the World Cup in 1990 in Italy, and he was not a political person. Some footballers have become very, very vocal and left-wing, but have been for a long time. You know, they come from places like Liverpool, for instance, OK, which has a history of it. But all of a sudden, Gary Lineker flourished into this, you know, political guru.
Which he can be, as long as he's not on a BBC forum, because of the strict impartiality rules.
My view, right, and as I say, I've got no axe to grind with Gary Lineker, who's done a lot for me in my life, so never tell you, but I honestly think once he got into broadcasting and saw which way the wind was blowing, particularly at the BBC, I think he might have thought it was good for him and his future to kind of join in, you know, with a sort of general consensus of the way people think. Because you know, not being rude to Gary, but does he really understand all the things that he's talking about?
But I think we have a clue as to why he's changed so much. He says on Twitter, which is now X, previously, before Elon Musk owned it, you could just read blue tick holders or people that you follow. So what that means is, previously on Twitter, if you had a blue tick, it meant you were verified. It meant you were famous. It meant you were somebody that the public would know. That's the people he used to look and listen to. But now you can buy a blue tick. So now he's saying, I don't want to be on it anymore because I don't know who these people are. Well,
there might be the mere proletariat.
Exactly.
Oh, dear. Down with the people.
And he said,
terrible.
That's you do see the vitriolic side of Twitter. There's no avoiding it. Well, I'm sorry, Gary Lineker, if you want to be a man of the people...
I agree.
And isn't
there some duplicitousness here from the BBC? Because they were supposed to have had an investigation, then they came out and said, don't worry, we've drawn up a new set of guidelines, but they didn't tell us that Gary Lineker had actually advised them on the guidelines he wanted.
Well, here's
and that's outrageous.
The BBC is supposed to be the public, the nation's broadcaster. We all pay. What say do we have in this sort of thing? We, you know, all of us pay the BBC, except, I don't know, maybe you, so you're an incipient criminal, but I mean, most of us who do pay the licence fee, you know, do we have any say in this? Because, frankly, it's embarrassing and I don't like my money going...
But also his salary is scandalous.
It is scandalous.
3 million.
It is
to be a football commentator.
I'm just going to defend to some degree. I'm going to defend Gary Lineker here. He isn't here to defend himself. He would say...
Come on if he wants.
We'd welcome you anything. He would say, I have a right, within the guidelines, to give you my opinions on politics.
But does he have the right to write the guidelines?
Can we just get a quick word from you two on Harry going to see Charles, King Charles, and being there for half an hour?
Didn't it illustrate the huge fracturing within that family? Not only that Charles's helicopter took off 3/4 of an hour after Harry pulled through the gates, but the fact that William decided to make it very publicly clear, I will not be meeting my brother. And we all know why, because they simply can't trust a word they say to Harry anymore.
Because they think he'll monetise it.
Absolutely,
If the cancer diagnosis of their father has not brought these two together, nothing will, Stephen.
I'm inclined to agree. I think it's quite extraordinary how the world's press have picked up on this. And one of the things that they are talking about is this animosity between the two brothers. It's almost a sort of Shakespearean story about this. But I have to say, and Mike puts it quite beautifully, you know, the helicopter takes off as the car comes in. I mean, that says it all.
It does.
Really does.
It does.
Right, thank you, gentlemen. We have to take a very quick break, but coming up next, the Nottingham killer is getting benefits because he is in hospital as opposed to in prison. Are you OK with that? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight are author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do, I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Very good morning.
Still with us, former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry. Now, we want to talk about this outrageous story in the Telegraph about the Nottingham killer.
Unbelievable.
Slayed 3 people.
Unbelievable.
Students, the grandpa, then tried to kill 3 more. He's entitled to £380 benefit because he's in a secure mental hospital. Has the world gone mad?
I think it has. Technically, he's in a hospital, and the laws are that prisoners cannot claim benefits. So if he was in a prison, you couldn't claim benefits. But Callaghan, the man we're talking about, can apply for universal credit payouts of up to £360 a month because he's classified as a patient.
It's disgusting.
I mean, apart from anything else, what's he going to spend the money on anyway?
Well, it'll collect in his
Of course it will.
And when he leaves, if ever he's released, because he's not got a whole life sentence, he's got the money.
This is about £5 a year. So if he was there for 20 years, you'd have £100,000.
But doesn't this prove the point why he should never have been charged by the CPS with...
Absolutely.
He should have been murder because he was a cold-blooded...
Of course he was.
Murderer.
That's right. He planned his murders. You know, he planned his murders. He stole a van and drove it into other people. That's a bit premeditated. That doesn't just come to you because you're hearing voices in your head. The government says entitlement to benefits is by law dependent on sentences. The Work and Pension Secretary is looking at the specifics of this case. I would urge the government to change the law immediately.
Quite. Well, I'm surprised about this because during my many years as an MP, people used to come to me and say, look, my aunt's in hospital, she's in there for 3 or 4 weeks, they've stopped her benefits. And the reason why you don't get those benefits when you're in hospital is they deduct what they call hotel charges. Because obviously, most of your benefits are for your food, your sustenance, your day-to-day living. And if you're in hospital, you're not spending money on food. So I think this is an odd story. Because, I mean, the issue about whether it should have been criminal or civil is another matter, and I think we can talk about that, till the cows come home. But I don't think he's going to get 360 quid a month.
But he's entitled to...
Note the 2 words, up to.
Yes. Well, £3 a month is too much.
I'm with you there.
He shouldn't have any. He should have not
I don't think. Look, if you're in hospital long term, you can claim housing benefit because you still have your home. You've got to pay the rent on it. What you cannot do is claim for your day-to-day expenses.
He has no rights in my book. He's a monster.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, another shocking example of inactivity by the government. This story's been published now. Mel Stride, I think, is the Pension Secretary. He should have issued a statement 10 minutes ago saying this will not happen under my watch.
I know.
That's, you know, that's firm government. Proactive, because we know this will outrage the public. It will enrage us.
There is a review into the whole way the Nottingham authorities handled everything. And part of that will be with the CPS's balmy decision to charge him with manslaughter. This should be part of it too, shouldn't it, Mike?
Well, they can get out of it the way they normally do and say this all goes on hold until the end of the review. That's what they normally do, isn't it?
They kick the can down the road.
Kick the can down the road, but stop the payments.
Winston Churchill had a rubber stamp that said "Action this day," and he used to use it frequently. In fact, he wore it out. I believe the only person I know who's worn out a rubber stamp.
Brilliant. Talking of controversial leadership, though, with decisions being made or not made, let's talk about Donald Trump. So we do not have
There's no segue from Churchill to Trump, please.
He does not have immunity from these charges that he plotted to overturn this 2020 election defeat. What does this mean for him, Stephen?
Well, I rather like the way that the judge has said, you know, he is Citizen Trump. Now, most people would be quite proud to be called Citizen Trump or Citizen Kane or Citizen whatever. But look, what it means is that his great thing about I'm untouchable, you can't touch me, I'm about, you know, I mean, which is embarrassing anyway, simply doesn't stack up. I don't think that this actually, you know, destroys the argument that the Colorado case about whether he should be on the ballot paper or not. I think that's a different story. This is specifically about the January attack on the White House.
He will appeal to the Supreme Court, and
where he's got a 6-3 advantage.
They're Republicans.
3 of whom he's appointed.
Of course, and also it would also kick it into the long grass. So the appeal will probably wait to be heard before the presidential election anyway.
But I do think there is a bigger issue here. You know, the idea that a president can come out of office and then be charged for things that happened whilst he was in office. Does that mean we should have charged George W. Bush for invading Iraq?
Well, and Tony Blair.
And Tony Blair, absolutely. I'm talking about in America.
Sure.
Does it mean in America that Kennedy and LBJ should have been charged with extending the war in Vietnam? I mean, where would it end if you're allowed to charge the President of the United States of America for policy decisions while he was democratically elected?
I think it would be very, very difficult to actually come up with a legal case against Lyndon Johnson and JFK. I think it's a different matter altogether. This is a specific one where he's accused of inciting one of the worst and most dangerous and damaging riots which killed people.
He's never been found guilty of anything.
No, I appreciate that. So let's have the day in court. He's been charged with it. I think the point here is, and I think Mike makes a fair point there, but you know that you can't retrospectively charge people.
Absolutely.
But this is the courts trying to subvert the democratic process.
Of course it is.
It's the overwhelming choice to be the Republican candidate, and the courts are trying to subvert that happening. Is that the role of the courts?
I can't imagine that a Republican-dominated Supreme Court is going to do that.
But it shouldn't have to go that far.
Exactly. That's the point. We know it's going to go to the Supreme Court. He'll probably win that. So it's got to be a stalling tactic here. Also, remember, this happened in Washington, D.C. Not a favourite place of Donald Trump. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. We have got another instalment in the next hour, but still to come. Sticking with American news, the former Fox News host Tucker Carlson is interviewing the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. I say there's nothing wrong with that. I can hear Stephen Pound groaning.
I wonder if Putin has agreed the questions in advance.
I'd rather talk than fight.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a chilly start out there for many of us, but plenty of bright weather for the rest of today, although cloud and rain will linger across the far south. That will come and go, especially across parts of Devon and Cornwall through the day. It's going to be on and off rainfall. The cloud also extends up to around the M4, but north of that, actually plenty of bright spells, some patchy cloud around, and continued sleet and snow showers for the north and west of Scotland. One of the two of these getting into parts of Northern Ireland as well, but actually away from these showers, feeling perfectly pleasant with temperatures of 7 to 8 Celsius across central parts and light winds, although it will stay windy in the far north and northwest. That wind will continue to drive snow showers into northwest Scotland overnight. Meanwhile, the next bout of wet weather returns to the south and southwest. This will be falling as heavy and persistent rain for parts of South Wales and southwest England by dawn. Mild here, but cold further north with temperatures well below freezing for parts of Scotland and northern England.
And as the rain in the south moves north and bumps into the cold air, well, it's going to turn increasingly to snow, mainly across mid Wales, the Midlands northwards. Increasingly, that's going to affect Northern England and Northern Ireland later in the day as well. But it's certainly going to be a wintry day with that snow building up, and some significant snowfall over northern hills could cause disruption.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come, dentists are in a state of decay. Did you write that?
I did not.
Well, the government is preparing to offer dentists cash incentives to take on extra NHS patients and send teams to schools to treat children's teeth. Does it all seem a little bit desperate or entirely necessary? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course the election is in November. By then the costings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boat, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
They can do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
.11am on Wednesday, the 7th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Dentists are in a state of decay. If you've struggled to see your dentist, you may be in luck, as the government has offered them a whopping £20,000 to take on extra patients. But isn't this just a sticking plaster?
And the protest, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman says the government has to go so much further to stop the glorification of Islamist terror on British streets.
And this idea of a royal reunion is looking less and less likely. The Duke of Sussex visited his dad following the King's cancer diagnosis in a meeting that only lasted 30 minutes.
Harry's been a traitor to his family, and I don't think he should be accepted back.
I don't trust him. I'd rather he didn't come over. I'm glad he's left that horrible wife of his behind.
Well, that's the view of GB News viewers. And sit down with Putin. The Kremlin's confirmed the Russian president is being interviewed by the US journalist Tucker Carlson. But will he put him to the test? Will he even call him a murderer to his face?
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is to appear exclusively on GB News' People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A in the North East on the issues that matter most to you. Let's hear what he thinks about it.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
That's this Monday evening in the northeast of England. So if you can be there, please go onto the GB News website or scan the QR code on the screen now on your phone and book your front row seat to ask your question to the Prime Minister. Please do it. Do it for me at gbnews.com/PM. Register your interest, scan the QR code.
Don't forget to let us know your thoughts on all our talking points today. Harry, Meghan, the King, when you last saw a GB News dentist. GBviews at gbnews.com. But first, here's the news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Prince of Wales is due to hold his first public engagement since his father's diagnosis. He'll host an investiture ceremony at Windsor Castle later after stepping back from duties 3 weeks ago, while the Princess of Wales recovered from surgery. Prince William is expected to carry out extra royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. It comes after Prince Harry was reunited with his father, arriving in London less than 24 hours after the King's cancer diagnosis was made public. The Duke of Sussex is said to have spent 45 minutes with His Majesty at Clarence House before the King and Queen were seen heading to Sandringham on the royal helicopter. It's unclear how long Prince Harry plans to stay in Britain. However, royal sources suggest he has no plans to meet with his brother. And dentists will be offered cash incentives to take on new patients, and some will get £20,000 bonuses under a plan to boost the number of appointments available across England. It means around 1 million people who haven't had their teeth checked for 2 or more years could benefit. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. It comes as hundreds of people endure long waits in Bristol, with queues seen around the block after a clinic made new appointments available on the NHS. Leading dentists are warning the recovery plan isn't enough. However, Health Secretary Victoria Atkins told GB News it will lead to faster care.
We want to go further and faster because I want to open up dental surgeries and appointments to more people around the country. So the plan that we're announcing today ensures that we are getting dental care faster, simpler and fairer towards people that really need it.
Meanwhile, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says things will only get worse under the Conservatives.
We can see here in Bristol the queues around the block reflecting 14 years of Conservative failure on NHS dentistry that have left people priced out and left behind. And what's so deeply disappointing about what the government have put forward today is, yes, they've copied the emergency package that Labour proposed, but they've neglected the fundamental argument Labour's been making, which is unless you reform the NHS dentistry contract and make NHS dentistry pay for dentistry, you're going to see more and more queues like this across the country.
Now, the former pop star Gary Glitter has been denied parole. He was jailed for 16 years in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls between 1975 and 1980. Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, is serving a sentence which is due to expire in February 2031. MPs have criticised the government's decision to build HS2 between London and Birmingham without extending the line to Manchester. The Public Accounts Committee says the revised plan offers very poor value for money, and they're highly sceptical of the Department for Transport's ability to secure private investment. It's after warnings that Phase 1 alone could cost £66.5 billion, far exceeding the original budget of $44.5 billion. Heavy snow could cause disruption later this week, with as much as 20 centimetres possible in higher areas. The Met Office has expanded its yellow warning, with temperatures set to drop across Northern Ireland, North Wales and Northern England later this week. We're being warned of possible power cuts, travel delays and isolated communities being cut off. Meteorologists say the cold spell could linger into late February. And the right-wing media personality Tucker Carlson in Moscow saying he plans to record an interview with Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News host announced the interview late yesterday in a short video posted to his website and social media. He said he plans to expose what he called lies told by other media about Russia, though he provided no evidence and falsely claimed that other journalists hadn't bothered to try to interview Mr. Putin. It comes as Russia's detention of the American journalist Evan Gershkovich reaches 315 days. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Difficult.
Very good morning. Stop talking, Andrew Pearce. You're on the telly. Right, you've been getting in touch at home about NHS dentists, and Anthony says, why are we surprised there's no money for NHS dentists? £9 million a day for hotel rooms plus benefits. Greedy private dentists are charging far more than European counterparts despite using the same equipment and materials.
And the number of people who we've heard anecdotally are going to have their teeth done in Turkey, Poland.
Or Blackpool, just like Jack. Listen to this. Jack says, morning, Andrew and Bev. I'm a 60-year-old veteran. I served for 27 years. I can't get a dentist, so during lockdown, I researched how to extract teeth.
Oh.
It's not so bad. Oh. He says, I pulled out 4, a bottle of whiskey, and go for it. Welcome to medieval Britain in 2024. Sorry, Jack, you've had to do that.
Sorry you've done that, but I wouldn't encourage other people to follow Jack's example.
People are.
I know, but
people are doing it. It's awful.
Dangerous.
Sandra says, I must be the exception to the rule. Myself and my husband cannot speak highly enough of our GP. Always able to get face-to-face appointments. It might have to wait a week, but if it's urgent, they will fit patients in. You don't say where you live, Sandra, which is probably just as well, because people will try and move there.
Look at that queue in Bristol for the dentist.
Exactly.
The new dentist went on for miles.
And Julie says, I have absolutely no problem with dentists choosing to exclusively treat private patients. However, if they do not agree to take at least 50% of NHS patients onto their books, they should be made to reimburse the public purse for their training.
Well, talking of dentistry, if you fancy an extra 20,000, you're in luck, because that's what the government's offering as a bonus to get more dentists into rural areas. But first, Prince Harry. Well, he was there for 30 minutes. Blink, and you missed him, and his conversation with his father.
That's right. So we're joined now in the studio by constitutional expert at Bangor University, Dr. Craig Prescott. Good morning, Craig. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, let's think about this from a constitutional point of view. So let's imagine that King Charles has a good recovery, let's say 3 months from now. He's better, but he feels exhausted by this whole process and just decides, I am going to take down my workload a little bit and I'm going to step down from my role of king, even though I've only had it for less than 2 years. What happens then?
OK, so Parliament would have to pass an Act of Parliament effectively transferring the crown to William, who would be next in line. That would need the agreement of the Commonwealth realms, so the 14 other countries where the king is head of state. Some of those would have to pass their own legislation. So, you know, it's not something that could necessarily happen just like that.
You'd also have to get the agreement of William to do it, and as he's still a young man with young children, he's not in any great rush to step up.
Well, no, indeed. It's sort of, and I think, you know, the expectation has been that Charles would, you know, be king for
10 years or more.
10 years or so, and maybe at some point then think about perhaps passing it down. And of course, the other thing that we've been talking about recently is that the royal family is much smaller.
Yeah.
And so if you lost the king and queen from conducting royal duties, then you're left potentially with a very small royal family of just Kate, William and the children.
You're sending Prince Louis to cut ribbons.
But rather than him, perhaps, another hypothesis, he could say, I want to step back for some time, and then could we then have effectively a regency?
Well, yes.
Princess Anne would come to mind. She'd be terrific.
Well, yes, potentially. As the law stands, that's what councillors of state are for.
Yeah.
But there is...
Remind people who they are, because, of course, it was Andrew and the dreaded Andrew and the dreaded Harry. We've now got other councillors.
Yes, so the councillors of state are laid down in legislation, and it's Prince William, Prince Harry, Prince Andrew, Princess Beatrice, but last year the law was changed to add Prince Edward and Princess Anne.
Yeah.
So you would expect William, Anne and Edward to be, two of those three would act.
Yeah.
But I have wondered whether we should just think about this. And, you know, I don't think there would be any harm if, say, Prince William was able perhaps to do some of these things on his own. I don't think the world would end if Prince William perhaps held a few Privy Council meetings if the King was unavailable, and maybe did some of the functions that the King...
Remind people what a Privy Council meeting is.
So Privy Council meeting is, there's about 10 a year, but there can be more. And essentially this is where ministers are formally sworn in when they're newly appointed. Orders in council are passed, which is a form of legislation. Sometimes this is about the overseas territories. Sometimes this is legislation about chartered institutions or universities. And, you know, this is when Parliament can be formally dissolved by royal proclamation and formally summoned. So when there's an election, there's a role for the Privy Council to play. So it is an important body that just clears a lot of key decisions made by the state.
Give us an idea of some of the duties that King Charles would normally be doing. I know we've got a sense of it then, but what is he doing behind closed doors at his desk that he might continue to do whilst he recovers?
Yes, so really on a daily basis, he has a red box that contains essentially state papers, and that can cover a whole range of things. It could be letters patent that are formally making a decision that he has to sign or he has to approve. It could be documents from ambassadors overseas with dispatches. It could be list of honours that he needs to approve, various appointments, list of appointments of judges, ambassadors, I've already mentioned, but it's those sorts of appointments, lots of public appointments as well.
And of course, he'll have his audience with the Prime Minister today, but he'll do that on a Zoom link of some form.
Yes, I would imagine, given that he's at Sandringham, that this would take place over the phone or by Zoom, as you say.
And that's something that William couldn't do, presumably.
No, it's sort of the relationship between the Prime Minister and the monarch is a personal one. You know, the Prime Minister is the monarch's primary constitutional advisor. And so, you know, that's a relationship that just is ongoing. And as Sunak said yesterday, he's in regular contact with the King, in addition to the audiences. You know, they are... And the two offices of Buckingham Palace and Downing Street are in constant contact over a whole range of issues.
I mean, it's easy to be, of course, it's easy to be sort of a little bit cynical about a family in 2024 that has so much immense wealth, etc. I'm not suggesting that I would like to see the royal family go. However, it does raise questions about when people are on the NHS waiting list for a year for cancer diagnosis, and King Charles was treated straight away. But the good that they do for individual charities and organisations, those are the people at the moment who will be disappointed by this. We've got Princess of Wales unwell for perhaps 6 months. We've got King Charles out of action for, who knows, perhaps 6 months. Camilla will continue some duties. William will continue duties. Princess Anne. We've got no Harry, we've got no Meghan, as would have been. Sophie and Andrew, they do a good job. Andrew seems to be on Edward, sorry. Edward, I always get them mixed up. Andrew's off the list. Edward seems to have gone a little peripheral at the moment as well. Sophie Wessex, she does a good job, doesn't she?
Oh, yes. You know, all the charities that, you know, have a royal patron sort of, you know, they value that in terms of the attention that it can bring. And, you know, it fits in with what the monarchy tries to do today, which is draw attention to causes, raise awareness of things, which is what the King has been doing with his
We've also got the
issue.
ageing Gloucesters, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. They're probably in their 80s, aren't they now?
They're getting there, yes.
I don't think I'd know them if they walked in here now with a cup of coffee for us.
Princess Alexandra, who still does the odd engagement.
Very few these days. It's
Duke
sort
of Kent.
Yes, again, he's more or less retired. You know, he no longer
Perhaps they'll have
presents...
to will them out.
Well, it's sort of, you know, but the age is there with them now.
Yeah.
You know,
What about Zara Tyndall, Anne's daughter? Does she do any official duties, or her brother Peter? Do they do anything as royals?
No, they don't do any official duties
Maybe it's
at all.
time.
And
Maybe
you know,
it's time
maybe
for them to
that's
step
something
up.
to think about
Yeah.
in the years ahead, is perhaps to bring one or two off the substitutes bench.
And that's why they're playing Zara Tyndall and playing Peter Phillips. No royal title at all. That was their mother's...
That's why they're so nice and so very normal as well.
Very
Probably
probably,
just what the royal family needs at a time like this. Craig, thank you so much. Great to see you. Right, moving on. American news.
Yeah,
Court.
Sorry, Karen.
You go ahead.
No, a court was ruled Donald Trump does not have immunity, after all, from charges he attempted to overturn the 2020 election result.
That's right. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's added to his greatest gaffes collection. Here he is, mistaking Emmanuel Macron for the former French president, Francois Mitterrand, who's been dead since 1996.
Right after I was elected, I went to what they call a G7 meeting, all the NATO leaders. And it was in the south of England. And I sat down and I said, "America's back." And Mitterrand from France, looked at me and said, "You know, why? How long are you back for?"
It's extraordinary. It's worrying.
Well, we had one last week where he was in a brewery and it looked like he'd been at the beer.
Had a barrel, I know. Well, we're joined now by Kevin Schofield, political editor of HuffPost UK. Sometimes you think our state of politics is depressing, Kevin, and when you get a glimpse overseas, you realise, actually, we're doing all right. It's so bleak. The Biden situation is awful.
The idea that a country as powerful and as large as America, the best they can come up with for the upcoming presidential election, the options are Joe Biden in his 80s.
He's not well.
He's clearly, he's failing. And Donald Trump, who's 77, I think.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's quite a few gaffes in his locker as well. It is really quite extraordinary.
He, of course, will go to the Supreme Court over this court setback, and he will play it up, and he'll say this is the establishment, the Democratic establishment, because Washington, D.C., know very, very anti-him. And he'll use it again as this is the system trying to stop him running, and he is clearly the overwhelming choice to be Republican candidate.
Oh, he will be Republican candidate, there's no question about that. And he will feed off that, and his supporters will absolutely buy into this argument that it's an establishment plot.
It's a deep state attack, is what he calls it.
The ballot. Now, I think it's quite dangerous to say that the president has immunity from any kind of criminal prosecution. I mean, give him carte blanche to do anything. I mean, if you remember when Richard Nixon, in his famous interview with David Frost, said, you know, if the president does it, it's not illegal. And at the time, there was a huge uproar over that. And essentially, that is Trump's argument. If he is carrying out his duties, as he would say, trying to overturn a democratic vote, then he is immune from prosecution. I mean, that's a pretty dangerous precedent. But you're right, this just allows him to, one, feed on this narrative of I'm the victim, and two, he'll just string it out for as long as possible.
On the American election, The Sun is reporting today, Harry Cole, the political editor, that there had been a view that the election might be November the 14th, but it now may move to October because they're jittery in number 10 about getting caught up in the presidential election, which is the first week in November.
Yeah, so I think it's the 6th of November, I think, from memory. I'd heard as well that there was some security advice behind the scenes saying, look, probably try and keep the next 2 weeks after the US election free, because there's a very good chance that the result will be challenged. There'll be all sorts of turmoil in America. Do we really want to be having our own election at that time while all this chaos potentially is going on?
And yet there had been a view that if Trump wins, that would benefit Sunak, because people think, oh, blimey, what's going to happen now? We need some stability. Stick with what you know.
Well, absolutely. So that might have well been the reason why he was edging towards the 14th of November. That seemed to be the consensus was that was when they were aiming for. But, October. The thing is as well, if you look at all the opinion polls, most voters just want this over and done with. They want an election. They want
in this country. I still got a hunch it could be May or June.
Well, you speak to a lot of people.
Because of the small votes is the big problem.
Absolutely. You know, there are reasons for going long, because the polls are still horrific for the Tories. But there are also reasons to go early, because you get this a whole summer of small boats going over.
And the rumour...
The May elections, local elections.
That it might be May the 2nd, the same day as the local elections is when we might have the general election.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I just ask you one very quick question?
Yes.
Labour have got a big problem now, haven't they? It's their flagship policy to spend £28 billion a year every year on a green campaign, a GB Electric, a GBNews, a British electric company, more insulation. There's a split now between the Labour leader and his shadow chancellor.
I think so.
It's a massive split.
Rachel Reeves was out and about last week and she was asked repeatedly about this 28 billion. She wouldn't even say the words, the phrase 28 billion. So she clearly wants it gone. Because the Conservatives are using it to hammer Labour over the head with it, saying it'll put up taxes, it'll put up interest rates. But Keir Starmer, just this week, he talked about the 28 billion again, so he is saying it. So there's obviously a split there. We're continually hearing reports and briefings that it's going to be ditched, but it hasn't been ditched yet. And the longer this goes on, the more it just gives a Conservative...
Another U-turn for Starmer.
We need to move on, sadly, Kevin. Good to see you, Kevin Schofield. Right, up next, when did you last see a dentist? Hundreds of patients have been queuing up for a dental practice in Bristol. Look at that queue there. Unbelievable. They are not alone. Millions of people are struggling to get an appointment. It feels like the system is completely broken. Is that your experience of your dentist service? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a Conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
11:24, you with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, we've got some breaking news. Spanish farmers are attempting to block access to Castellón port in Spain. They are protesting against citrus imports from third countries. Add it to the list of things that farmers are angry about all over the world at the moment. quite rightly too, in my opinion. These are the pictures of the farmers in Spain, just out of vision. Apparently, they've set some tyres alight. They've already had a victory. They have already forced the EU to back down on some of the issues around the net zero agenda in terms of the restrictions they were putting onto farmers in terms of the fuels they could use and also the vehicles that they could use.
They're a very powerful lobby in Europe, the farmers, and of course we saw what happened in Paris. They virtually was threatening to starve the city. Yeah, they're doing a remarkably well-organised protest. Started in the Netherlands, moved to Germany, Poland also. There we go. They set some tyres alight there. This is at the port of Castellón in Spain. There was some brilliant footage yesterday where the French police had put a barricade of cars across one of the roads, and the farmers, of course, don't need roads, and they just took their tractors around and round the police cordon onto the fields and carried on. Sure. They're a very powerful people's protest. Sure. Now, the government has offered dentists a whopping £20,000 to take on extra patients. Here's what the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, had to say about that.
We can see here in Bristol the queues around the block reflecting 14 years of Conservative failure on NHS dentistry that have left people priced out and left behind. And what's so deeply disappointing about what the government have put forward today is, yes, they've copied the emergency package that Labour proposed, but they've neglected the fundamental argument Labour's been making, which is unless you reform the NHS dentistry contract and make NHS dentistry pay for dentistry, you're going to see more and more queues like this across the country.
Well, we're joined now by Eddie Crouch, Chair of the British Dental Association. Good morning, Eddie. How can you sum up what has gone wrong with our NHS dental service over the last, let's say, 20 years?
That's true. Well, it's probably at least a decade of decline and neglect. That the Health Select Committee last year came out with a recommendation. The Nuffield Trust came out with almost a similar recommendation that the contract needs ripping up and starting again. And it's good to hear Labour have got that high on their agenda. Sadly, the Secretary of State hasn't got it on her agenda. And what we're getting at the moment is a succession of tweaks, which aren't really going to solve the massive problems that we've got.
Just dentistry used to be an appealing profession, presumably, for graduates and young people wanting to go into that particular area of medicine. Has it just become less popular?
No, I mean, the applications to dental schools, in fact, there's quite a significant number of UK-born people going and training as dentists across Europe. So dentistry as a profession is still incredibly popular. We have the highest number of dentists on the General Dental Council register that we've probably ever had. But this is a workforce problem, particularly in NHS dentistry. And when someone leaves the NHS, they probably see half the number of patients that they were seeing on the NHS because it is a treadmill system. And as a consequence of that, we haven't got enough dentists for the population of the UK.
But Eddie, isn't that the key? A lot of your colleagues are they're training and then they go into the private sector where they can earn far more money.
Yeah, well, that is the case. But if the NHS system was far more attractive, then they wouldn't do that. And the vast majority of people who graduate don't leave the NHS instantly. And many of them do work for 5 or 10 years in the NHS before they actually move and do more private work because they gain their experience in the NHS.
Just give us an idea of what the difference in salary might be, Eddie, between an NHS dentist solely doing NHS and a full-time private dentist.
Well, the income of NHS dentists, like the junior doctors, has fallen about a third in the last decade. We're not going on strike. We're actually walking away from the NHS. But people are not leaving the NHS to go and work for more money in the private sector. They're going to see far fewer patients, have a better lifestyle, have more time with their patients to actually deliver a quality of care that they're happy with.
Right, OK. Interesting. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you very much for joining us. We're up against the clock this morning, aren't we? Do you remember the Newcastle United fan who was banned because the Premier League was seeing that she said some stuff on social media about trans people that they didn't like? We're going to be following that up in just a minute. Don't miss it.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 11:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. First, to some breaking news. Fire crews are attending reports of an explosion in the area near the Old Bailey in London. Pictures posted to social media show plumes of black smoke billowing from the lower ground windows. It's thought to be due to an electrical fault in a nearby building. Police say it's not being treated as terror-related. This is a developing story and we'll bring you more as we get it. The Prince of Wales is holding his first public engagement since his father's diagnosis. He's at an event at Windsor Castle after stepping back from public appearances a few weeks ago. Prince William is expected to take on extra royal duties during his father's treatment. Leading dentists say a recovery package aimed at increasing the number of appointments available won't be enough to fix the problem. Dentists are to be offered cash bonuses for taking on new patients. That's as crowds of people continue to queue in Bristol after a clinic there opened its books to NHS patients. And for all the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or going to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2632 and €1.1729. The price of gold is £1,610 and 3 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,645 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
11:34 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
We are still joined by former Labour MP Stephen Pound, with the creaky chair, and broadcaster Mike Parry in the studio. Still Stephen Pound.
Yes, miss. I think that was your bones.
Now, we talked
Been
about
harsh.
this yesterday. This is Newcastle fan Lindsay Smith. She was banned from matches over social media posts that were deemed transphobic after investigation by the Premier League. Last night, she spoke to GB News. Let's have a look.
The thing about it was, Nigel, is they were actually warned by Harry Miller, Fair Cop. Yeah. He sent them over a big list of information around his ruling, which should have made them stop in the tracks and realise it wasn't malicious communications. They had no reason to be bothering me. And instead of reading it, they decided to just sack it off and come to my house. So, and that was, I was about to sit down to my tea when they came to the door.
You must have been horrified.
It was terrifying. Yeah. Terrifying. I was shaking. I was sick to my stomach. I mean, I've never so much as had a warning off the police, if I'm honest. So to have two men turn up at my door threatening to arrest me was mortifying.
Welcome to communist
What's happened
Britain.
to this country?
Mike Parry, your reaction to this. Just a reminder, this is because Lindsay had put some tweets out saying that she didn't like this trans activism ideology and that a woman could be a woman and a man could be a man.
Yeah, absolutely. She's been done for what they call gender-critical views, OK? Yeah. Now, this lady's gay. She champions lesbian, gay and bisexual rights. She does. Has it sort of missed the Premier League investigators' attention that Newcastle United is owned by Saudi Arabia, in which country it would be illegal to be gay or transgender or anything else? I mean, the sheer hypocrisy of... And by the way, the lengths they went to, following her around covertly, not openly saying we're going to monitor your movements, following her around covertly, in a manner she didn't even know she was being watched. I mean, people have described it as being like a Stasi investigation. To me, it's one of the most brutal and terrible injustices of personal liberty in this country I've ever heard about. This is North Korea.
And Newcastle United, they should be ashamed of this.
Of course they should.
She's been a fan of that club since she was a child.
Just to point out, it was a Premier League inquiry, OK, it was drawn to their attention.
Get lost.
Well, not only that, but of course, you're quite right, Andrew, because Newcastle United, as a member of the Premier League, have a man sitting on the board of the Premier League. Now, so he should have struck it out.
Now, the Premier League... They will say that they took this action because they had a complaint from a trans person to say if they were in the stadium with this girl, they wouldn't feel safe.
Come on, but you got 70,000 people. Look, I tell you, this is, quite frankly, one of the most sinister pieces of news I've heard in years.
I agree.
What terrifies me about this is, firstly, that there is actually a group of people, a cohort of investigators employed by the Premier League, presumably sitting around with their raincoat collars turned up and their dark glasses on, waiting to dart out and knock on people's doors and start investigating.
Yeah.
I say the Stasi would be... They'd be ashamed to be compared. This is much, much worse than the Stasi.
Yeah, I agree.
What can be done about it, Stephen? What can be done?
Well, what we seem to never, ever do is trace these things back to the person who made the decision. This is the Paula Vennells and the Post Office situation.
You're right.
You know, what we used to say in the BBC, if anything went wrong, deputy heads will roll.
Accountability deficit, one might say. It's
I wish I'd said that.
Coined by the Us For Them crowd, who wrote a book, the accountability deficit, and that is the time we're living in.
That is absolutely precisely the point. So who green-lighted this? Who in the Premier League said, let's go after this person, for one person out of hundreds of thousands of Newcastle supporters made this complaint?
Absolutely, one person made a complaint. But the question I'd like to ask now, and which the Premier League have got to answer immediately, is... Are you making any other inquiries into any other fans at any other clubs? Because they must have a unit now who go searching through Twitter, searching through X, trying to find something to be offended by, and then go after these people. So we need to know if this unit couldn't have been set up just for one case.
I bet somebody's put in an FOI.
It
must exist.
But they were set up to look at racism, OK, and to identify people who maybe...
This is not racism, though, is it?
This isn't racism. Their remit was to identify racists who might go into football stadium stands and shout racist abuse. Now,
that's a noble cause.
It is a very noble cause. And actually, we've done a huge amount of good in the last few decades to get rid of racism in football stands.
Well, I can remember very, very well, as I'm sure Mike did, the days when bananas used to get thrown on the pitch. We heard the monkey noises. OK, there have been a couple of cases. There's been one in Italy very, very recently where this has happened. And one, sadly, in a lower league in this country. But that doesn't happen so much anymore. That's actually been forced out because people now... If anybody at Fulham started saying that people around them would call you out for that. You just don't do it.
But
That's right.
I hope that the Newcastle fans should rise up in protest over this.
Well, look, I've worked in Newcastle. A lot of us know Newcastle. To me, it's one of the most amiable cities in the world.
We're going to run out of time, and I want to hear your topics on your opinions on other topics. So just hold it there for now, guys, because we're going to tell you what controversial politician, former Fox News anchor, has interviewed. Don't go anywhere.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama. And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast-acting and that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions. We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Fortunately, Stephen Pound and Mike Perry have stayed with us because we've got some more great stories to go through. Right, Tucker Carlson, you may be familiar with him. Some of you will, some of you won't. He was the Fox News anchor for many years. He got sacked fairly recently, and he's on Twitter now, and he does his own broadcasts on X, as it is called now, under the ownership of Elon Musk. He's going to do an interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This will be the first interview that any of us have seen in a long time, actually. Good idea, Stephen?
Well, I happen to believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant. At the moment, Putin has this reputation as a sort of Bond villain stroking a Persian cat in his underground lair. I think bring him out in the open, and actually it will reveal him for what he is, as a bragging narcissist.
Which is not what Biden's going to want. It might be there's all sorts of Western leaders don't want us to see that.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about this is, would Alvar Liddell have interviewed Adolf Hitler in 1935, 1936? And obviously, once the war had started, you couldn't. But I think, in many cases, get these people out in the open, expose them, interview them, and take the opportunity to interrogate them, because break the mystique, dissolve the mystique.
I'd want to do it as a journalist.
Yeah, but if you went to your register
at
the Daily Mail and you said, I want to do an interview with Vladimir Putin, what would they say?
I think they'd say, if we can get it, get it.
Yeah,
really? How about you, Mike?
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. I mean, look, Tucker Carlson has pulled off, in my view, a world coup here, because all the, a lot of the American broadcasters are now getting very jealous and saying...
That's exactly what it is,
a total jealousy, we wouldn't lower ourselves, stoop to these levels and all that. Sorry, but this is going to be a sensation. People around the world are going to watch it. And what I most like about it is that Putin could make a slip-up and tell us something we don't already know.
Yeah.
You can imagine the American intelligence services will be watching every word out of his mouth.
But we also give us some insight into his health.
His health, but also his philosophy on life.
Yeah.
And even the body language, right? They'll be examining the body language with Tucker Carlson to see whether he's frightened of him or his eyes dilate and all that kind of stuff. I think it's brilliant.
But the one problem is it'll be a pre-record.
No, it's not. They're showing it unedited on Tucker Carlson's website.
I'd be very, very...
They're showing 45 minutes unedited.
Putin speaks good German and very, very good English. So I guarantee that he'll have an interpreter there, because that'll give him the additional time.
Yeah,
of course.
And so
interesting. That would be interesting. But given that Tucker Carlson on Twitter has got 12 million followers, how many people do you think have watched the clip of him explaining why he's doing this interview? How many times do you think that video has been watched so far? This is not even the interview. This is trailing the interview.
100 million.
I was going to guess 50 million.
70 million.
Yeah, 70 million.
70 million.
Yeah.
There's huge interest in it.
That's the kind of eye-watering figures that someone like the BBC could only ever dream about getting an interview.
And he's getting a lot of flack, isn't he? Because people are saying he couldn't possibly do a proper job. Well, let's see.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, he's, again, a lot of jealous American and worldwide journalists are saying, he's become a lackey to Putin. No, because he is who he is. He is Tucker Carlson, and he has a way.
Yeah.
He has a way. He's a skillful interviewer. He has a way of putting questions to people and the way they have to answer them.
People might say it's a risk for Tucker Carlson. It's maybe a risk too for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
If he comes unstuck.
I think it's a big risk. I agree with Stephen. I don't think it will be broadcast unedited. I don't think they can take that chance. They might say, unabridged, unedited, but there's got to be delays and things.
I think there's not live, but Tucker Carlson has been adamant that he's going to be unedited, the full 45 minutes on the website, but they will do edited versions, of course, on Twitter.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be people like Biden, Sunak, who might be nervous about what people might say? Because the idea that Putin is all bad and Zelensky is somehow Mother Teresa reincarnated is what... that binary belief in that war is what is generating so much support for it across the world.
You're opening a huge, huge can of worms.
He's going to open that can of worms.
Look,
very good point.
My first reaction was that next week Kim Jong-un, who's going to be interviewing him? Simon, who knows?
Yeah, but we haven't committed to a 100 years war on behalf of...
No, I agree. I think it might recalibrate some people's perspectives on this. I doubt that many people will actually step back and say, actually, Vlad the insane, a decent bloke. I don't think that'll happen.
But I've never sat down and watched an interview with Vladimir Putin.
No.
And they used
have any
to
of
be.
us?
Yes, because they did used to do.
We don't know what his
time ago.
Don't know what.
Years ago, he was regularly interviewed.
I totally agree, but we don't really know what his voice sounds like these days, in case he is ill and all that. And also, Steve's made another very good point. Zelensky's been interviewed a million times, right? So we've had the point of view from Ukraine's side. Now, Putin's had time to analyse all that, and he's going to come back.
Here's one thought. We know that Putin uses a lot of doubles.
Will it be?
Is Tucker Carlson going to be absolutely certain he's talking to the
right one?
I think he may have to do a DNA test before he starts.
Stalin had a dozen doubles.
Well, exactly.
And because they were never quite sure that actually it was Stalin had died.
Yeah.
Right, what's this story about Labour government, Mike, steamrolling the food industry, the junk food industry? This sounds like a fairly good news story, as a parent at least.
Well, it's on the front of the Times this morning, right? And I'm afraid the minute I see see a headline, Labour to get tough with junk food firms. All that rings in my head is nanny state intervening again, telling parents how to feed their children. And what I really want to know is, what is their precise definition of junk food?
Right.
I bet it's different to mine, because if they're going to tell me a quarter pounder with cheese and fries at McDonald's is junk food, they can go and whistle, because I'm going to be eating those forever.
And politicians know very little about junk food. Well, remember when Cameron's government said that actually it took in W.H. Smith...
Chocolate oranges.
Chocolate oranges by the till. How dare a Prime Minister micromanage...
Well, OK, that's a different matter. Firstly, this business about the nanny state, and I appreciate we're here in the aura of Jacob Rees-Mogg, but I've always rather liked the idea of having a nanny. I think it's a marvellous idea, I think a great idea. But look, what he's talking about is there's certain breakfast cereals which are drenched in sucrose and fructose and aspartame. I see nothing
wrong... read the label. People can read, can't they? Read the label.
And our parents too stupid to work out what they're feeding their children?
We need help. We parents need help. I don't want the government to nanny.
Pester power is the problem here.
Help us. It's too much.
You've read enough about it, Bev, over the years to make your own mind up about, you know, when you see your child pick up a spoonful of something, put it in his mouth, if you think it's dangerous, don't let them do it.
I don't
But it's
buy
not
it.
down to the state. Well, exactly.
But it's
Parent
so
power.
hard. And
Parent
a lot
power.
of parents don't say
Have you seen them
no.
on the way back from school? I mean, just look, 3:30 any afternoon, all the kids coming back from school, piling into the shops, loading up with rubbish. And as
What
far
are
as
they
I'm...
going to do, Labour? Are they going to put the prices up?
No,
they're
they're
going to make it more difficult for households who are struggling to pay their bills.
The reason we first ever had, you know, fair food legislation in this country is people used to adulterate flour with chalk, and people used to sell it's in the, a long time ago, and there'd been a lot of chalk. So the government actually brought in trading standards. I think we should use trading standards legislation and say you cannot load these things up with sugar. You can't do it.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Mike. I'm so sorry, gentlemen. We've got to move on because still to come. It's PMQs, of course, and as much as I find you slightly more interesting than Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, they do have to take precedence today. Don't go anywhere. We'll tell you what questions Andrew and I would ask the PM today if we were there.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A fine, bright day for most of us, but it will be cloudy in the far south, and in the far north we'll continue to see some wintry showers, mostly for the far north of Scotland. Most of these showers will be falling as snow, some sleetiness around coasts. Otherwise, a lot of fine weather for Scotland, Northern Ireland into northern England, some decent spells of sunshine. Further south, the cloud thickens and will keep relatively low cloud in the far south with some patchy rain for the far southwest, but it's mild here. 11, 12 Celsius. Elsewhere, single figures and feeling cold in the wind across northern Scotland, where those snow showers will continue to arrive overnight, leading to some icy patches by dawn. Otherwise, a widespread frost for the northern half of the UK, but for the southern half, the cloud thickens through the night and outbreaks of rain move in. That's going to be a mild start to the day in the far southwest, if rather breezy. We've got significant temperature contrasts across the UK as we begin Thursday. Very cold in the north, very mild in the south and southwest. In between, this band of rain moving north, and as it mixes with the cold air, we're going to see some significant and disruptive snow. Mid-Wales, North Midlands, northwards, and especially for the higher parts of North Wales, the Peak District, the Pennines. Some disruption is likely with up to 15 to 25 centimetres of snow building up, and some freezing rain for higher parts of North Wales later on, staying dry for Scotland.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are
so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have 2 SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had 2 brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can turn down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
Yeah, the growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem. Maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Well, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks, or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, we're now going to Gloria De Piero and Christopher Hope for Prime Minister's Question Live. Yes, it's that time of the week for you to be sending your questions to what you would want our viewers and listeners to put to the Prime Minister.
Yes, that's right, Andrew. It's all about those people who are listening and watching at home, isn't it?
What we'd like to ask the Prime Minister, or indeed the Leader of the Opposition, please do send us your questions. Tell us who you are and, most importantly, where you're from. We want your best questions for our panel. gbviews@gbnews.com. PMQ's Live isn't about me or Gloria, it's about you at home and your best questions. But firstly, Bev and Andrew, briefly, what would you be asking the PM today?
Briefly? Do you like his emphasis on briefly?
You mean Bev be brief? That's very typical. I would say
the Speaker will interrupt you if you're too long, Bev.
Okay, no, I would say this, Prime Minister, are you going to read the Riot Act to these church leaders who are converting asylum seekers to Christianity so they can avoid being deported?
Good question,
And
Bev.
I would probably say, Prime Minister, given that you have committed £2.5 billion of military aid to Ukraine and have committed to more than 100 years' war with them, how keen are you to hear what Putin has to say in his interview with Tucker Carlson on Twitter? Will you be watching it?
Well, thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Bev. Now, it's fast approaching midday.
This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Yeah.
PMQ's Live starts right now.